Welcome to Under the Pine Tree with Adam Wade. Our special presenter today is Adam Wade. And Adam is the president of the 9th Quorum of 70 Pacific Mission Field and East Asia Mission Field. Adam was previously the president of 70 for the Canadian Mission Field. He currently sits on the Community of Christ Peace and Justice Committee. He has served as East Asia Mission Center president, pastor of the Korea Church, and as youth and young adult minister for North South Wales within the Australia Mission Center. Born in Melbourne, Australia, he received a bachelor degree in chemical engineering from Monash University, Clayton, Victoria, and a Master of Arts in Christian Ministries from Community of Christ Seminary, Independence, Missouri. Adam worked in manufacturing science and technology as an experimental scientist for the Commonwealth Scientific Industrial Research Organization. He has also been involved in a number of local council committees. And I'm going to say, even more important than everything else that he's done there, he is on the Baker family list of favorite people to ask to come to speak at Naranto reunion. And we are just ever so happy that Adam got up at probably 4:30 in the morning to be here at 5 o'clock with us here today. And Adam, we're just thrilled that you are here. And I'm going to turn things over to you now.
Thanks, Kathy. I don't know how special I am. I really think we just all trying to muddle our way through life. And it's interesting. I always I didn't give them any bio information because I like to see what people find out about me. So I did want to change one thing that's obviously hasn't been updated. I no longer sit on the Peace and Justice team. Instead, they shifted me over to the Theological Formation team. So I currently sit on that team. I apologize if I am a little fuzzy this morning, as I am normally a night owl. And yeah, the mornings do not necessarily fit me that well, but we'll muddle our way through, and hopefully you'll find something in this session meaningful. As I tried to think about what I might do, I was drawn back to something that I have done previously, and depending on where you've been and where I've been, it might have been something that you came up you experienced in one of my classes over the years, but I tended to breeze through this pretty quickly. And as I've started to drill down and think a little more deeply about it, I actually think it's worth exploring a little deeper. And so I'd like to do that with you this afternoon, where I'll just share some thoughts and ideas, and then look to you to be able to add to examples from your life as we go ahead. So a lot of this will depend on your participation, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to share as well. So just remember to unmute your mic if you'd like to share, and we'll go through and spend some time together this afternoon. I'm really happy to be here. I really treasure the memories I have from the time serving in Canada, and it's one of those places in the world, and this is going to sound really strange, but I think we've just got Canadians on the call, so I'm safe to say it, but Canada was one of those places that almost felt like home. It's not quite home, I realize that, but it almost felt like being home. And I'm not sure why that is. The other place is England, actually, where I was guest for a reunion there. But I just found one of the really fascinating things, and this is a really weird thing to notice, but I did. No one in Canada ever picked on my accent. Whenever I go anywhere in the US, people always say something or make a comment about my accent. Whereas in Canada, no one did, which is really kind of fascinating. And so I'm not sure if it's part of the Commonwealth thing that ties us all together, or what exactly it is, or, you know, like they say, Canadians are just overly nice. And so I'm very polite and didn't pick on my accent, but whatever it is, I do feel like I've made some really important connections and friends while being there. So I do miss it. I do miss going there, but also recognize it was really quite difficult given that, like Australia, Canada is massive. So to try and get everywhere and see everyone was often very difficult. But I really did enjoy my time. So I'm really quite happy and feel privileged to be asked. So I appreciate Kathy offering me that opportunity. So if any of you have run classes in the past, you might have had this experience. Kathy sort of said, what is it that you would like to share with us at the Under the Pine? And these were sort of the questions that instantly came to mind. And then when I looked back at them down the line, I'm like, oh, how exactly am I going to do these things? Like, these are massive questions. And, and for many of us, the answer to all of these could quite easily be, well, I don't know. Like, I've got no idea. And I think it's probably rather brave of me to try and look at them all in a 1 hour casual type session that we're going to be sharing in this afternoon. But I guess when it's come to discipleship, and as Kathy mentioned, I was a scientist. I think that is one of the coolest titles I've ever had, is experimental scientist in my life. But when it comes to discipleship, I've always erred more on the side of the practical. So something tangible that you can look at and work towards in your life. And I wanted to ask, how do we potentially break down or start some inroads into answering some of these questions? We're not going to be able to answer these questions in sort of that hour session we've got with each other today. But how do we start making some inroads into these different sorts of questions? And so we'll spend some time sharing together in something that I guess has been helpful for me to identify in my life. And one way we can do that is to look at our needs as human beings. Who are we as people? So we're going to go into that, but before we do that, I always would like us to start with a word of prayer. So if you're willing, if you would pray with me. Loving God that connects us across land and ocean, we're so grateful for the ability to gather and be in one another's presence and in the presence of your Spirit. As we continue our journeys as disciples, I pray that your Spirit will continually guide and nudge and nurture each one of us, so that we may look for those opportunities where you are offering us blessing, you are offering us comfort, but also where we may offer those things to others. So may your presence be felt in our conversations, in our time together. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So I would really love to, but I can't claim this as my own. It actually comes from a professional speaker that has spent most of his life traveling around the world. He does lots of large corporate events, helped out CEOs of massive companies, small communities in rural areas, all different types of people, demographically, economically, and culturally. And in all of his years' experience, he began reflecting through thousands and thousands of conversations and figured out in some ways that as he went through all those different people and all those different cultures, that as humans, we kind of have 6 different needs. And he actually separates the first 4 needs from the last 2. And we'll get to why that is a little later. But as I was listening to this, I found this idea so profound, and I began to unpack it because I realized that it wasn't just how I was living my life and for me personally as a human, but I realized it correlates perfectly with life within the church community as well. So this idea of human needs, if we're not finding them in a body of faith, if we're not meeting the spiritual and physical needs of people, well, why would they come and be a part of us? And so, like I mentioned, this framework of thinking gave me some really practical steps to consider as we think about our lives as disciples. Now, I know for some of us, this might seem a little unusual, given we could say our role as a church is really to provide people with a place to connect to God's Spirit, to proclaim Jesus Christ and promote communities of joy, hope, love, and peace. And I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. But the question still comes back, but what are some practical things we can do in our everyday life to help facilitate that? Because I know individuals who have had really profound and powerful experiences with God's Spirit, yet they've chosen not to be engaged with our community anymore. And so this is really to help us think practically about who we are as a community and the tangible things we can be doing to live that out. And so, like I said, the first four identified he terms as the needs of the personality. And these are things that every person on the planet needs to survive. So they need to find a way to meet these needs. If those needs are not being met, that is one of the things that they will desperately work at to try and meet that need in some form or another. And like I said, for me, this then correlates into our lives as disciples. To disciples being fully living this aspect of our lives, this community of Christ, whether it's at camp or it's in a congregation or whether it's in your own private spiritual journey, these aspects are needed. So I want to be clear, I'm not saying they're desired, they're needed. And so let's have a look at those. So the first one is certainty. To be certain about something. So as you see in the picture, we know that the sun rises. It hasn't quite yet here, but we expect that you'll be able to get out of bed. We expect that your car will be there in the morning if you own a car. If you go to work every day, we expect the things that you left there at work will be the same when you turn up the next day. For example, if there was a program on your computer that kept moving icons on your screen every time you turned your computer off, you would probably get too frustrated and you'd want a new computer. If all of a sudden you went into work every day and someone kept stealing your stapler or your printer or a light, that would not be that certainty that you need in your life, and you're likely to get very frustrated. It's something we need, is that consistency in our life. And I'm going to open it up for some comments in a moment, but I'm sure there are also certain people, when it comes to reunion, that like the same patch of grass or the very same cabin every year, because that's where they always are and that's where they've always been since the beginning of time itself. I'm sure that doesn't happen at your camps, but I certainly know that that has happened at my reunion camps over the years. But part of that is speaking, I think, to people's needs of certainty. They know that when they go to camp, there's certain things that they are guaranteed to be there and to experience. And so I wanted to open it up and ask, what does certainty look like for you, whether it's at camp, in your church life, or in your personal discipleship? Perhaps another way of phrasing it is, what is something consistent that you've always appreciated about your journey as a disciple? So I wanted to open it up, unmute yourself and share with us, what does certainty look like for you in your journey? We don't have to go down the list. You can just pick one of them and share with us about one of those things that you've really valued about the consistency in your discipleship.
That someone will be there when I'm going through anything, whether it's something good, something bad, somebody will back me up.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy.
For me, I would say that a certainty pertaining to reunion is that I will always leave reunion at the end of the week feeling closer to God and spiritually recharged. That always happens, and I have that certainty that it always will.
Thanks, Adam.
That God loves me.
Thanks, Susan. That's been a certainty for you. And also, feel free to throw it in the chat box if you're more comfortable doing that. Someone has put in the chat box, or the same pew, I think, Mary Jean. So yes, I could tell you in my home congregation exactly where everyone used to sit every single Sunday. It's one of those funny things.
Yeah, I think for me, it's being accepted.
So it's interesting because then when those things that you have shared, when all of a sudden they're not met, or there is that sense of perhaps things were slightly different, it catches us off guard and it makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, and then we're not so sure anymore. So certainty is one of those four. The next one, funnily enough, is uncertainty. And I like this little picture. This was on an Australian beach, and it says, "Enter waters at your own risk." It's funny that they didn't say, "Do not enter water ever" at all. It's like, yeah, it's Australia. If you want to go in the water, there's sharks there, but it's really up to you. That's kind of the Australian spirit in some ways. Yeah, Danny.
I didn't know that sharks could read, but that's fascinating. That's only in Australia, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right. So
yeah.
I will admit, actually, I love diving with sharks. I've been diving with sharks a number of times, and it's one of the most amazing experiences. And I think a lot of times they're just either very hungry or very territorial when shark attacks occur. Unfortunately, if they take a bite, it's often usually a big bite and it's fatal. But yeah, it's phenomenal. So I love sharks, which is strange being a surfer, but anyway. So uncertainty, the balance, I guess, to certainty is that we all need variety in our lives. So I was going to ask everyone, I've got you up in the chat box on my other screen here, hands up if you like surprises. Who likes a surprise? Well, I think you're all liars, because we don't really like surprises. We like surprises that we want or that are nice. We don't typically like surprises that we don't want, because we call these problems that we didn't anticipate. So the good surprises, yes, we like the good surprises, but sometimes those difficult surprises we don't necessarily love. Or the same question, who likes watching the same movie over and over and over again? Yes, my mother used to watch Dirty Dancing, of all things. I think I can quote Dirty Dancing probably verbatim, because as a child, that was the movie she used to watch all the time. But I actually think there's so many movies out there. Experience something different, people. Put some uncertainty in your life. So if I said to you, every year at camp, the same person, except if, of course, it was Danny Belrose, I think we'd all be okay if it was that. But if any other person gave exactly the same sermon with exactly the same scripture, the same story, everything was identical every single year, how long do you think you would continue attending that preaching service at camp? You might just decide, oh, we hit a bit of traffic, or we took a little bit longer setting up the camper van than what we thought. We need uncertainty in our lives. It keeps things interesting, and we need that variety in our life. So I want to ask the question again. What are some of the things about uncertainty at camp, in your church life, or your personal discipleship that you value? It might seem a little strange, but what are those elements of unpredictability or something out of the ordinary that has been meaningful to you in your experience? Danny.
Adam, I'm not going to dominate today at all. I sat through yesterday's session with the intention of not saying anything and did very, very well until the last 5 minutes. And so I'm going to get my 5 minutes in here now, and then I'll shut up for the rest of the session. Interesting thing. If I guess I'm going to go to a little theological aspect in this respect. If God can't surprise you, then your God is too small. There was a time in my life when I knew everything. Let me tell you something, that's a burden. It was such a burden to know everything, I decided to give it up. But what I'm saying is that theologically, I had put God in a box. I wanted the certainty of being able to say, I understand who God is and what that means in my life. I went to seminary, I got a master's of theology degree and a doctorate in ministry. Let me tell you what that is. That means you go to school, you read a lot of books, you write a lot of papers, and you go home. And you sort things out, and you continue to sort things out. I used to say, that's the way it is. That's back there when I knew everything. I was certain. I used to say, that's the way it is. And over the years, I've become a little wiser. I gave up that knowing everything thing. It's just too heavy to carry. And I now say, it seems to me. I'm not going to push us down the road of theology, but my theology has changed and will continue to change as the God that I understand and myself, who I try to understand, begins to expand and understand it greater. And I guess what I'm saying is that uncertainty itself sometimes, and I'm not throwing a blanket on what you said earlier. I think certainty is something we do desire and want, and we do want consistency. And we have certainty in certain areas. But I think the time when we want to make everything so consistent and so certain, we can get into trouble if we box ourselves in on that. That's why I think there's a great deal to be said about uncertainty, the willingness to say, I don't understand all of this. There's a mystery here that I can't wrap my arms around and my mind around, but I'm going to accept that because that's part of what life is all about. I'm sorry to go on, Adam. Cancel.
Oh, I appreciate your thoughts, and yeah, I think there is a balance there, and I know looking at some of the aspects when I was in Seoul in terms of the church growth models, they talk about keeping the structure of things quite similar, because if it's constantly drastically changing every single time, people don't know what they're going to be turning up for, and they're not going to know if they like it or not. But at the same point, you don't want to have it exactly the same, because then people get really bored. So I think you're right. I think there is this balance that we need, and oftentimes we perhaps have deviated more on the side of let's focus on our certainty. And I definitely know a congregation I was involved in went down that path as some of the youth and the young adults started going off to university and changing. Then they'd choose not to come back, or they'd be there for a little while and then they'd go somewhere else. Instead of saying, hey, maybe what we're doing is not meeting a need, they went the opposite way and said, we've obviously changed too drastically. We need to try and keep things exactly the same, because then no one else will leave. And then, of course, inevitably, someone else left, either because life circumstance or they moved away or whatever. But their solution was to then go, we obviously did something wrong. We need to stay exactly the same. And inevitably, that congregation closed a few years ago. So there's a definite balance that I think we need some sense of uncertainty in our life, and for the Spirit to surprise us. Like you said, one thing I've always said is, whenever I think I have one question answered, there's then another 10 questions that I have to face. And then as I go along and get an answer for each one of those, of course, it's a bit like a pyramid scheme. Mary Jean said, one of the uncertainty things is that she's appreciated is the opportunity for exploration, stretching, and learning. And I think I saw someone else's hand up earlier too. Is there someone else that would like to share? Yeah, Kathy?
This particular reunion is really truly all about uncertainty, because I decided very early on that I was not just going to control what was going to be in these sessions. I waited and waited for things to come my way. And what people are experiencing this week is things that came to me, people that came to me, ideas that came to me. I didn't know, I didn't go, we have to do this at 10 o'clock, we have to do this at, that's not what happened here. It was all about, I don't know what it's going to look like, but here it is.
And it's interesting, I'm sure you can probably have had comments like, oh, it's good to be able to do this again. There's probably that certain element that's been shared, but it's also like, oh, this is very different and I'm not sure, but I appreciate the balance. So it's good. Yes, Susan.
I'm one of those people that watch TV shows over and over. I've probably watched West Wing 100 times, but I have a difficulty with uncertainty. And that's why I watch the show, because I know how it's going to end. And when I need to give it to God, to let it go, I have difficulties with that. So I'm good at it at times, but then I always get the, well, what if, what might happen? So as in life as well, I do have difficulties with the what ifs and trying to figure out what might happen in the future if I do things a certain way. And I know I'll never know it and it's mystery, but I struggle with that.
Thanks, Susan. I appreciate you being honest there. And as it's a balance, it doesn't need to be balanced evenly. You know, the balance for some people will be one way or the other. And also, I think it's important that you highlight for you that that balance would tend more towards the certainty. So then if people are looking to adapt and change things drastically, there's going to be people in our community that are really going to struggle with that because they want that elements of certainty in their life. And on the same side, then you can probably go, oh, you know, I don't need as much uncertainty in my life, but maybe those people in our community do. And so that we try and find that balance together as the community. Yes, Dulcie.
Sorry, I try not to talk too much, but I'm just one of these people who thrive on the uncertainty. When I retired as a teacher and they sort of went through my list and they went, holy mackerel. I said, yeah, I get bored after 3 years. And I like to skill development. And I find the element of uncertainty has led to my learning because I love the challenge. And I don't just mean academic learning, but life learning. And because of my life, I've had to deal with so many issues and different things that I've learned. One, not to panic. Two, don't make decisions until I have to. And three, go with the flow. Like Kathy said, I know people have my back. And that has enabled me to reach out and do things that some people think I'm absolutely out of my tree about at my age, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so I love that uncertainty has allowed me to develop, oh, Daryl, you'll love this one, my personality. And I still love to get up in the morning and go, wonder what I'm going to do today, what's going to come my way. And it doesn't matter whether it's a crisis one way or a crisis another day. I love not knowing what's coming my way.
Yeah, thanks, Dulcie. Well, we now know that if you're both in the dining room and there's an issue, we probably have Susan on one side and Dulcie on the other. So, but the beauty of the community is being able to be in that space together and to hold up each person and value each person, but to look at that and say, okay, what, in some ways, if someone is upset, well, what current need is not being met for them? What is that element that's causing that person to respond in this way? So, a consideration. So the next one of the four is significance. So people have this need to feel special or unique. the interesting thing with significance that he talks about, and I've found, the fastest way for an individual to feel significant is through violence. And so if we think of someone on the street, if you're walking down the street and all of a sudden someone stops you and pulls out a weapon and holds it in front of you, in that moment, how significant is that person in your life from 1 to 10? They're probably at an 11. That is the single most thing you will. If your phone rings or you get a text message, you're not going to go, "Oh, just hold on a sec, this might be my mum texting me." Oh, no, it's actually, no. Your sole focus in that moment is on that individual. And so violence takes instant significance. So as a peace movement, we need to then be looking at ways to help people feel significant through non-violence, which is much more challenging. But I think that's part of our calling, and that's who we are as a people, is to make and recognize and help people recognize that, yes, they are important and they are significant. And so we've had a couple of people share a little bit earlier, but what is an example, and try and be a little more specific, or it's like, yeah, whenever I go to camp, I always feel like I'm of worth. Well, could you think of a more specific example of a time when you were made to feel significant or worthy? What was it that that person perhaps did, whether it was at camp or in your church life, or even your own personal discipleship? What is something that an experience you had where you were made to feel significant or worthy? Kathy?
Someone at my school decided to name the library after me. I mean, I couldn't believe that it just, it was just something, wow, when I was retiring.
Wonderful. Yes, Susan.
You've done it this afternoon when you've acknowledged what I've said. I felt significant. You didn't say, "Really? you don't like uncertainty?" I mean, you acknowledged who I am and that it's okay.
Susan. Louise.
Yes, many years ago, I was at camp and I helped in the kitchen. And I really felt significant, like made a big difference. We had so much to do. So everybody that was willing to help was much appreciated.
Oh, thanks, Louise. That's great. Mary?
Recently, I conducted a funeral, something I hadn't done for several years. And I was very humbled by the appreciation of the family.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, Dulcie?
Most of you are aware of my connection with Acaspas and Valdoredo in El Salvador. But when the floods came and my little village that I love so dearly was flooded out and hurt, within a week, I was able to raise $3,500 from my friends and get in touch with Yesenia and Raphael. And we were able to get a truckload through the bureaucracy down there, a truckload full of food to feed a whole village for 2 months. And if ever there was an affirmation of me trying to decide whether I wanted to become dedicated to this group and to the mission down there, it was the fact that I had people who said, "Yes, here's the money, do you need more?" and who are backing me. And it sort of made me feel like, hey, I'm just a little Hague farm girl with a horse and a dog up in Northern Ontario. But look what my friends and my community and I am able to do. And I've never forgot the tears of joy when Yesenia sent me pictures of them going around to each household and giving food out. Like that's almost like a miracle. It is a miracle. And it was affirmation to me that God is with me and this is what I should do.
Thanks, Dulcie. And Mary Jane shared in the chat, just being able to make a difference in someone's life just by sharing with them, listening, creating a close friendship. I'll share one that I think is significant to this group. It was last year in the middle of lockdown where I got an email from one C. Baker just to say, everyone at Reunion is just thinking about you and wanting to say hi. And so that, even though it's been so many years since I was present there, yeah, to see that little note from Kathy was, yeah, an important thing in my journey. So, yeah, that to feel like you have a special place, I think is important for each and every one of us. Which then brings us to the last of the 4 needs, which is love. Now, I'm glad Joyce is smiling because I wasn't sure that she would get this reference because this movie is now 20 years old. But I think this comes from a movie, Cast Away with Tom Hanks in 2000. Some of you are nodding. If you have just been watching Dirty Dancing for your entire life and you need to branch out and watch a new movie, then perhaps consider going and watching Cast Away. It's a wonderful movie, but it basically talks, the movie's about someone that's stranded on a desert island by themselves. And in the movie, they create this relationship with this volleyball that washes up on the shore called Wilson, after the Wilson volleyball brand. But even in the midst of, I use that example because even in the midst of being completely alone on a desert island, they found a way to express and to feel like they were receiving love because they were able to interact with Wilson. We have that wonderful hymn that I have sung for many years now. They will know we are Christians by our love. By our love, they will know we are Christians by our love. So everyone needs to find some element of love in their life, some care and compassion shown towards them and their ability to show that to others. This is probably the easiest one of the 4 for us to identify with when it comes to things like camp and church. But again, I just wanted to have a few people share what is an example of how someone made you feel loved, perhaps in a time when you weren't feeling so loved.
Well, for me, it was this past, I guess, June. One of my campers from out west from Spec invited me to her virtual graduation. And that meant so much to me. That was really cool. And so I got to attend graduation for high school in Alberta from my room in Ontario. And that was really, really cool. And just the fact that she reached out and was like, hey, I'm graduating and I really want you to be there. And that just meant a lot.
Thanks, Joyce.
Adam, we were telling our grandgirls this morning that we were going to be listening to you. And we mentioned your name and that one little grandgirl who is now 12, probably, I don't know when you were at Toronto. She says, is that the guy that gave me the little koala bear? So you showed love to her, giving her that koala bear.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah. Yeah, Kathy, and then Louise.
A few years back, I got the dubious job of canceling this camp. And it was a kind of a tough road to be in. But I got at my door one day a package with baking in it. And that came from Amy Shepherdson. And it was just, it lifted me. I knew I was loved.
Oh, thanks, Kathy. Louise.
I got a prayer shawl from Barb when I was going through a really difficult time. That was really special to me. And I did have a chance this week to participate in, different things that we can make to give to others or make other people feel special.
Wonderful. Thanks, Louise. David.
I was just going to say I've had a 56-year love affair, this American, with the people of Naranto, and there was a period of my life where that week of reunion, when I was very lonely here in Ohio, got me through the year, and just to get back there every year was just so important to me at that time in my life.
Thanks, David. Doreen?
Unmute myself.
Oh, just go again, Doreen. I think you clicked it twice. There you go.
Okay. We have a woman in our congregation that's taken it upon herself during the pandemic to send out cards with personal notes on them. Every time I get a card from her with a personal note on, I feel so loved by her. And she's doing a wonderful job in our congregation.
Yeah, thanks, Doreen. So it's good. I'm glad none of you went to the kind of love that you felt as a teenager making out with someone down by the campfire circle. But that's right. We're talking about that love or that kindness or that interest in you. Sometimes just people taking an interest in what you're doing, the willingness to spend time with you and teach you a new skill, or maybe even to create something. So this one, I'm sure we could talk about easily all afternoon, but it's one of those important elements of the needs. And so that takes us to the 4 needs. And this is kind of where it gets a little bit weird, because those 4 needs of people, so we're talking about certainty, uncertainty, significance, and connection or love. Everyone finds a way to meet these needs in their life. In some ways, if that need's not being met, they will find and search for ways to have those needs met. So correlating that then to our church community, if we're not finding ways to meet these in our community, or sorry, if you personally, then chances are you will not likely stay involved. And by extrapolation, if we're not finding ways to meet these in our community, then others are going to choose not to be involved. So if people don't feel significant, if people don't feel loved, if they feel like everything is way too certain and there's no change, or they feel like everything is just constantly changing and crazy, then people are going to struggle within our community. So it's easy for us to look at ourselves and say, oh, how can I find that need being met in my life a little more? But I want to try and also help you to spin it around in your mind and think about, well, how can I be maybe offering some of these things to others? And that's where my 70 aspect comes in. But to be thinking about others in terms of how we're sharing, how do we make others feel significant? How do we make others feel loved? What's something out of the blue, like sending a baker's packet that catches people off in the uncertainty to say, oh, that has been part of my discipleship. But yet it still gets weirder still. And I'm sure you're sitting there going, you said there were 6, that's only 4. There was 6, there was 6. And yes, there are these 2 other needs that separate all of the people this man interacted with. And the question he looked at, and the difference between the people when he asked the question, was, how are you doing really? Are you leading a happy and fulfilling life? And the surprising thing he found was that with those who said that they were content with their life, that they were happy, that they were joyful, they had these 2 extra needs that were helping them lead a more fulfilling life. Didn't matter about their socioeconomic status, where they were in their stage of life, how successful others had thought they were being. These two things separated them from everyone else in terms of whether they felt full and content and happy. But unfortunately, we've run out of time, so I won't be able to share those with you this afternoon. No, I'm just kidding. And so for me, I've actually termed these, when we think about our church experience and our discipleship, I've termed these as the needs of the Spirit. It's funny, when I heard this, I thought back to this story. I had a friend in Seoul when I was there in Korea. And we'd often head out for dinners and hang out. And one day we were sitting there across the dinner table and she turned to me, she said, "Are you happy?" And she's like, not now, but like in your life, are you happy? Do you feel content? And I sort of thought about it and went, yeah, like I would say that. Yeah, I feel content and happy in my life. And she's like, really? Because I don't. And it kind of threw me, because here she was traveling the world, she was teaching at a university, she had a ton of friends, she was friendly, was just one of these people that it was just fun to be around. So for me to hear her share that was like, really? And it caught me off guard, and then resonated with these two things as to perhaps why I answered the way I did and she answered the way she did. So the first one is for us to grow. And he found that people that were actively seeking to grow themselves were people that were more content and more happy. And so for us as disciples, that could mean growing in connection with God's Spirit, which sometimes we use the word for this, discernment. To help us grow, it could be spending time with scriptures. It could be spending time at seminary, like Danny did, but spending the time after study to unpack it and really go through the process of learning. And in doing that, we could look at more of the cultural context, the writers, or the nuances that we perhaps miss on reading face value. It could be learning in discussion groups such as this with other disciples. Or I actually find that sometimes in prayer, we can grow in our understanding if we perhaps shut off our mind and open our mind to listening, and not just running off a list of things to God, but taking that time to pause and asking how God may be speaking to us and guiding us. So what is something that you've done to personally grow, and how has that been valuable to you? Is there anything in particular that you found, actually, I remember going through this and it's been extremely valuable for me in my life? Barb's put in here, my mother is the most content person I've met, stuck in a wheelchair or in bed, unable to do things for herself. And Mary's put in, people will forget what you said, will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So that was back in our love section. But what is something you've done to help grow yourself, either in recent years or in the past? Yeah, Kathy, sorry.
I decided that I was going to be a lifelong learner. And that was really, really important to me, especially after retiring. And there were some things that I just really wanted to do. I wanted to take some courses, but I just didn't do it. And this year, during the pandemic, that time, I actually took 3 Disney Institute courses that have changed my life. And so, yeah, investing in myself.
Thanks, Kevin. Mary Jane's put in here, leading a drum circle, definitely a way to grow. Well, is there one more? Yep, Pat.
Many years ago, I was asked to teach at reunion, the kindergarten class. And that scared me to pieces because I am a nurse, I am not a teacher. And so I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured 4 and 5-year-olds I probably could deal with because I might know as much as them. And I continued to teach and continue to teach, mostly because my grandchildren were in some of those classes, and then I taught the next class because they went to the next year and da 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 da. And and I've shared some of that teaching ability at Naranto with some of the children there. And the thing that's given me the most joy and appreciation about that is that I now have the title of Grandma on the Hill at Scientario.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pat.
But it was scary.
Oh yeah, it would terrify me, don't worry. So Barb's also put in here taking temple school courses and making craft for others, and Susan's put to grow. Mead's course being leadership, and David's put in Community of Christ Seminary, which I admit I did grow a lot, especially from the best professor I ever had, Mr. Danny Belrose, but I won't play favorites. And so then that's the first one he found. The second one he found was actually, and Dulcie mentioned this just a moment ago, but that contributing to something beyond ourselves. So service to others. I like this quote from the current Dalai Lama, who said, "Our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them." There's a scripture in Acts 20:35 talking about what Jesus said, and it said, "In all things I have shown you that by working hard in this way, we must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he himself said, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.'" And of course, a perfect example of that would be where Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. So by contributing beyond ourselves, not just through giving our money, but by helping others, by being generous with ourselves, being generous with our time, actually helps us lead, from what he's found, a more fulfilling life, a life that is more blessed. And so we've got time for just a couple of others as we begin to get close here, but we already heard from Dulcie about her experience. What is something you do for others, or something you have seen someone else do for others? Yep, Dulcie.
I want to go back a bit. One of my pet peeves at my age now is that, and we heard a lot of people saying, I'm taking this course, I'm doing that course, I'm self-learning. And with the kids, with my students over the years, the abuse and the street kids and all that, and I would say something, but what does that look like? What do you do with it? And that's always my first question when I look at anything. Not what it says, but what is it, what are you doing, and what does that look like? And I have a really hard time being patient with people who don't do. Like, put it in action. What does it look like? And so I get hung up on that in response to other people, and I'm not a very patient person. Most people know that, but it's fine to say I'm doing this and I'm doing that, but what are you actually doing with what you're learning?
Oh, thanks, Dulcie. Susan?
In the city I live in, I'm sure it's all globally, but our nurses and doctors during this pandemic have worked so much overtime, and they've put themselves out in the front. And I can't say enough for our medical professionals and people giving the vaccine. And people working in grocery stores. We've had so many people that are doing things during a lot of uncertainty. So I really appreciate all the people that have come forward to help.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, it's been remarkable. Mary?
Along with Pat Lewis and others, I've been very interested in the prayer shawl group. and have been using my skill as a knitter to knit prayer shawls. And some of the reactions I've gotten from people has just been overwhelming. How much it means to them to have something that's homemade, that took time, and you give it to someone who has a special need. And I just was thinking today, we had a native indigenous woman visit us a couple of days ago, and we used to be with her and her husband up north when we taught. She lost her husband in June, and it just hit me at lunchtime that I want to give her a prayer shawl, because of course she's grieving and would like to feel that support. And it's amazing what that small thing can do for a person.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And yeah, appreciate your openness to the spirit and the guiding that is there for you to respond in that way. And so, again, the purpose, I guess, as we come to a close here today, or in some ways the takeaway for today is, for me, not only to look at ourselves and look at how we might try and meet our own needs, but crucially, it's also for us to consider how we might help others on their journey in terms of experiencing this. How can we help others contribute to something other than themselves? How can we help others to grow? And to look at how you can provide those opportunities for someone else. So what type of disciple do you want to be? Well, honestly, this is not the be all and end all. I'm not presenting this as the single solution to all of the church's problems. That would be wonderful if that was the case, but it's not. But I thought maybe it's just something for us to think about and to have some practical steps to consider how we journey as disciples together. How do we have those 4 basic needs met, but also how do we grow and serve others? And as we live our mission, maybe these are some of the practical ways that we can be doing to provide for others. You know, to ask those questions about how could you show someone love? How could you make someone feel significant? How do you share reassurance? Or how do you catch someone off guard? All of those questions, I hope that you'll continue to carry with you and consider on your discipleship journey. And I really appreciate each one of you sharing your thoughts with us today. We've had a few more messages in the chat box. One from Anne saying that she took the spiritual mentoring class, and I'm sure she is sitting when she can for 15 minutes a day. So definitely in the doing phase. Mary Jean said camp quality is the most outstanding camp, where it gives everyone on staff gives of themselves in incredible ways. And we've got a few other comments in there from John. Appreciate being able to listen in here for a short part. And Louise, a simple smile means so much. Yes, we don't need to overcomplicate things. The old KISS principle, keep it simple, silly. So to be able to, just try and make small changes in our lives. So I just thought I'd share that with you all. Again, appreciate everyone sharing their thoughts and concerns. I've had your faces up here and been able to see as you shared. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm happy to hang around. It's very early here still for me. So if I'm happy to hang around and answer some more questions or have a chat afterwards, but I'll pass it back to Scott. Thanks very much, everyone.
We want to thank you, Adam, for coming this afternoon. However, our church is worldwide. Our love is worldwide, and what you've shared is very meaningful. And just thank you so much for that. Something that I remember very strongly about you, Adam, when you came to Toronto was, first of all, I said to you, I'm not going to give you a specific role, except that I want you to be with the people. And you showed me how important that is, because I just watched you being with the people and bringing the people in. And I just, it's a picture in my mind. So I just want to thank you for all that you do. I want to thank everyone who is here. Your being here, your presence here means a lot. Means a lot to the rippling out of what we've learned today. It means a lot to me personally. When we plan things and we have people who take the time to come to see what it is, it's important. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation to come. So again, thank you all for coming here, and thank you so much to Adam for this great time under the pine tree.
Thanks, Adam. Just great to see you again. Appreciate it.
All right, good to see you too, Danny. It's good to see. I see everyone's faces again.
Don't you love looking across and seeing seeing everyone? It really makes a difference. There's my Dawn there. Oh, Pearl, I see a hand. Yes. Nicely done, Pearl.
Of course, now the
Danny?
big question is, do I go back to bed or do I stay up? I'll probably just stay up.
Danny, it's so good to see your face again. And hear your words. I've missed
Well,
you.
I'll tell you, thanks, Dulcie. It was great to see you too. I was gonna say hello, but what are you gonna do during Adam's class? It's great. Actually, you said you're glad to see my face again. One of the things that I've discovered over the years is that it sounds like I'm boasting, but I'm not two-faced, because if I was, I'd wear the other one. But Dulcie, you haven't changed much. At least you look great, and that personality is still the same. I remember stories you told, which I won't repeat here, but they've been great stories.
Denny, and I want everyone to hear that. You came and did a junior high camp for when I was directing my very first time. And I can tell you, I've wrote down and I use your stories about looking through life through rose-colored glasses and which is more important, the milk container or the vase. And those two lessons that you taught many years ago, and I was in my 20s, so that was almost half a century ago.
And I was in my 50s.
You were, yeah. I just want to tell you that in what I'm doing now, I often think of you and use words of wisdom that came from you and Penny.
Oh, that's very kind. Send those things, those lessons to me, because I could use them again. I don't
recycle. Yeah, recycle.
Oh,
it's funny you talk about. I was going to say it's funny you talk about the face thing. So in Korea, the Korean ladies would come up to, so Gary Logan was the former pastor, or other foreigners that would come back and visit, and they'd be like, "Oh, Gary, it's good to see you again. You've gotten fatter." Or, "Oh, Gary, it's good to see you again. You've lost some weight." And I'm like, you can't say that to people. Like, that's just not how foreigners operate. And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And for them, they are trying to show that they are such good friends with you that they can notice subtle changes in how you look because you've either gained or lost weight slightly. So that's their way of saying we're very close friends. But I'm like, saying people have lost weight, that's fine. Otherwise, just greet people and say, "It's good to see you again." So then when I go there now, of course, I know if they say, "Adam, it's good to see you again," I've put on weight. So
yeah, well, I'm suffering from COVID-25.
I wanted to say, if Dave Wilson said that I'd put on weight, I'd be pulling out his tent pegs and praying for rain.
Oh, you'd be doing more than that, Dulcie. You'd be doing more than that.
I know.
And there's Mary Jean. Mary Jean, oh my gosh, Mary Jean. How's your father, Daryl, doing? This is an inside thing. We do this all the time. Yeah, I love Daryl. He's got a great sense of humor. He has to have it, but I'm dealing with him. So
yeah. It's being recorded. Don't forget.
That's right. Oh, hey, I wanted to
Yeah.
show this. I don't know if you can see it or not. One of the things that we've done at our congregation, and Penelope and I live very close to the congregation. We go down at least 2 days a week to fill up the blessing box. We call it the blessing box or free pantry. And our church is not in an area that you would think there would be a lot of people with needs of food and so forth. It's not in a bad set of time. It's a set of area of town. But it's surprising. We go down twice a week to put food in, and there are some neighbors that are on their own are bringing food and putting in there because it's unlocked, and it's a great little program. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some young adults here setting up like a book station at the front of their house for
Right. Yeah.
borrowing books and replacing books, and it's been fascinating to see how the community, like when it's been locked down, it's sort of like the community has become more active in some ways, which is sort of counterintuitive, but it is interesting how that's happened.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Well, thank you again to everyone, and thank you again to Adam.
no worries. Just
And
happy to do it. Happy to be.
we'll say goodbye now. Everybody, if you wave, we'll
Yeah. Go
wave
back to
Adam out.
bed.
Have a great day.
I think the sun's still not up, so I'm definitely
Go to bed. Go sleep.